Hello, and thank you for tuning in to a winter live walk here on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. It is Sunday, January 14th, 2024. My name is Rob. I'm a tour guide and the founder of TripX DC, and I'll be taking a stroll around and showing you what it looks like in the middle of winter. So, if you are joining me here live, go ahead and say hello in the live chat so that I know you're here, and let me know where you're tuned in from and what the weather conditions are like where you are right now, because this weekend I know the weather conditions in a large part of the USA, if not the world, are, let's just say, not the greatest. So we can compare to what it's like here in Washington, D.C. And then I will also have an announcement, very big announcement about upcoming TripX DC tours for this spring. So go ahead and say hello. Rolls for Harari. Hello, good to see you. It is minus 6 degrees this morning in St. Louis, and very cold. I assume minus 6 is in Fahrenheit, but if it's not, let me know. I don't think I've ever given a tour here in DC where the temperature was minus 0 degrees Fahrenheit, so that is very cold. Last year I did give a tour, and it was on Christmas Eve, and I believe the temperature at the starting time was 9 degrees Fahrenheit. So I think that's the coldest that I've ever done. So hopefully everyone is staying warm today. Korg says hello from Oklahoma. Temp is minus 6 Fahrenheit. That is quite a bit colder than it is here right now. So like I said, large part of the country, if not the world, very cold today. And Sky Blue Jay, good to see you here, my friend. It is afternoon in the UK, and Jay says it looks colder in DC than it has been in Coventry. Yeah, so today is right around the freezing line, right around 32, and not sure if it's coming through on camera, but there are some very, very small snowflakes flying around. It's basically been 2 years, almost 2 years to the date, since we've got any snow here in Washington, D.C., or at least any snow that has stuck to the ground. Obviously, every once in a while we get one of these like you see here today, where it just kind of blows around a little bit but doesn't stick to anything. So usually what will happen is it'll stick to the grass first, and then to the sidewalk second, and to the street last. So take a look up ahead. You'll see plenty of green grass, or brownish green grass with no snow stuck to it. So that shows what's going on right now. And Hank says in Nashville, 20 degrees. Eddie Saunders, good afternoon. Good to see you here, my friend. It has been a while since I've done a live stream, almost 2 months. Just got a little busy with the holidays, as I'm sure everyone did. So these are actually I don't mind winter. I don't mind a cold, brisk day, but these live streams are a little tricky to do in winter for the simple reason that I have to control the phone, which means I have to have my hand outside of the gloves, and so my fingers get a bit cold trying to run these things. Eddie says it is sunny and a warm 50 degrees here in Raleigh. All right, finally got a warm place. And Gary Sorensen from Wisconsin, where it's minus 3 and minus 21 wind chill. Yeah, that's the other thing. I don't mind a cold day, but a windy day, that can be a bit tricky to navigate. Dave Wheeler, yes, it has been a long time, almost 2 months since I've done one of these. So hello from a chilly 50-degree Central California. So Rolls of Ferrari wants to know what's the average. I don't know what the average low temperature is, but I know the average high temperature around this time of year is around 40 degrees, in the 40-ish degrees. So that's why I always get a bit of a kick out of people telling me that they don't want to come to Washington, D.C. in the winter because it's too cold. I think if it was true that people didn't travel to cold places, ski resorts would all be out of business, right? And 40 degrees is above 32, so on average, you come here on any kind of random winter day and you're likely to get an above freezing experience. So that's not too bad. So I don't actually think winter is a reason to not come. That said, Winter is definitely the low season. January and February are the slowest months in DC for tourism, so if you're looking to come and beat the crowds, it's not a bad way to do it. All right, John Paul Jones is watching from Lynchburg, Virginia, and signed up for a private tour next weekend, so I will see you there. And Korg just visited DC at the end of September, and it was so easy to find everything. Happy to hear it. So today is a good museum day. I have a feeling folks who are out and about today, there's actually a decent number of folks out and about given the circumstances, on their way to or from one of the museums potentially. Now remember, over on the right here, remember that the Smithsonian Castle closed about 1 year ago, and it will be closed for the foreseeable future. They are doing a massive, massive renovation on the castle. So that is one of the oldest buildings in all of Washington, D.C., and it basically was just in desperate need of an upgrade. So they will be doing some major structural upgrades over there. There was never really a whole lot to see in the castle, but it is a cool building. So in a few years, hopefully that'll be looking good. And the Air and Space Museum still under construction. I will give an update on that when I go past. Probably will not be out here live streaming for too long. Can already feel my fingers getting a bit numb, so we'll see how long I can go. Okay, JA wants to know, is Navy Yard still a good place to stay during the winter with kids? So I highly, highly recommend, if you are struggling to decide where to stay, I have an entire podcast episode. Go to triphacksdc.com/podcast. I have an entire episode where I just went through in great detail all of the 11 areas where I recommend staying, the pros of each, the cons of each, why you might prefer one, why you might prefer one of the others. Listen to that episode and see if you can make a decision based on that. My general advice is any of the 11 areas are good any time of the year. Some are going to be better for some people for some reasons, and only you can ultimately decide that. Okay, so they are setting up some kind of event over here, not quite sure, or taking down, not quite sure what it is. But the Natural History Museum here. So Smithsonian every year releases statistics, visitor statistics for its museums. And when I started tour guiding a bit over a decade ago, it was always a battle between the Natural History Museum here and the Air and Space Museum, who was going to take the crown for the most visitors in a year. In 2023, probably thanks to the Air and Space renovation, Smithsonian Natural History Museum just blew it out of the water. They had by far the most visitors. So that one is going to be the most crowded, does not require any kind of timed tickets or anything like that. Very popular with kids. So if you go, natural history, extremely crowded. I'll probably do some kind of video or short or something about the 2023 statistics, because I do personally find them a bit interesting. All right, that political guy is coming next weekend. What are some more upscale restaurants? There's so many. Highly recommend checking out the Washingtonian Very Best Restaurants guide. I'm really not a good source of information on upscale restaurants because I just don't eat at them that often. You figure there's dozens, if not hundreds, of great restaurants in DC, and if I ate at one every single week, wouldn't even scratch the surface. So unfortunately, I'm not the best source on upscale restaurants. I can tell you about fast casual though, big fan of those. And Rolls Ferrari says, looking forward to checking out the Air and Space Museum once it's done. Yes, once it's done, it's going to be great. And JA watched the neighborhood episodes. Thank you for watching those. Glad you enjoy them. And wondered if winter less sports changed things. So I think I generally have said Navy Yard is a great area to stay if you are a sports fan, because you're going to be right in the action. You're going to get the game day experiences, both baseball and soccer. Those are both off season right now, obviously. Baseball's not back until April 1st. April Fool's Day, I believe, is opening day at Nationals Park. And MLS, they're starting really early this year. I believe MLS is starting the last week in February, although I haven't checked the DC United home schedule to see if they're going to get one of those first week games. But yeah, it's still a fine, all the areas are fine areas to stay for tourism. But if you're looking for the game day experience, obviously you got to come when there's games happening. Okay, so we're going to, on the way over, I want to make an announcement about XDC tours for this spring. And so that is specifically March and April. I just opened up the calendar 2 days ago, so anyone who was on my interest list already got a notification. I know many of you have already booked, and so thank you for getting those bookings in early, because if you wait too long, and this is not just about Trip XDC tours, this is if you are coming in March, if you're coming in April, specifically if you're coming the last 2 weeks in March, the first 2 weeks in April, essentially spring break, it's going to be packed. There's going to be a ton of people here. Stuff's going to book up. Stuff's going to sell out. So book early. Don't wait too long, especially if that's when you're coming, because everybody else is coming then too. All right, so let me show you the Trip XDC tour offerings for spring 2024. So there will be 3 tours offered this spring. All of these tours are the monuments and memorials on the National Mall. They all cover exactly the same sites. So what's the difference? So my bread and butter is the private tour. That is a tour with me. It is $399 flat price, and your group can have a single solo traveler or a big family of up to 10 people. And you will be on a tour with me, and there will be no one else with you. So that is why it is called a private tour. And when does it run? It runs whenever I'm available, and you can see the dates that are still available and not yet booked on the website on the calendar. So let me go ahead and show you how you can do that. All right, so when you go to the Trip XDC website, you're going to see on the landing page for all the tours a calendar, and it's going to look exactly like this. Any date that still highlighted in green is still available, and you can go ahead and do your full booking, payment, everything right on the website. Just click on the date you want, complete your booking. Any date that is not highlighted in green means I'm already booked. And as you can see for March, there are quite a few of those already off the calendar. So do not wait too long, especially if you want to do the private tour, because there is only one of me. So once these dates are taken, claimed, that's it. All right, but good news, I am also piloting what I'm calling a semi-private tour this spring. So how does that work? It's ticket-based, so everyone who attends needs a ticket. Tickets are $89 per person. I am guaranteed the guide, and the reason I'm calling it a semi-private tour is because the group is limited to a maximum of 10 participants. So we will not be doing any big groups. We will not be doing any mega groups where you get lost in the shuffle. It's still going to be a small group. You'll still be able to interact with me and enjoy the tour that way. That is going to run 4 times, only 4 times. The last 2 Saturdays in March, the first 2 Saturdays in April at 9:00 a.m. And there are still tickets available for that. So if you want to do it, go ahead and get those tickets. And finally, the Monumental Trivia at Twilight Tour. I know many of you have been on this one before. This one is going to be with Christine. It is $54 per ticket. We still try to do the small group, but we have a maximum here of 15 participants, and it will run this spring, March and April, on Wednesdays at 5:30 p.m. None of those dates are sold out yet, so you still have a chance to get tickets to Monumental Trivia, but like I said, I do expect that they will sell out, so do not wait too long. All right, so I'm going to go over to the Air and Space Museum to show you what it looks like next, but in the meantime, if you just tuned in, hello, my name is Rob. I'm a tour guide and founder of Trip XDC, and we have over 25 people watching now, and I don't know if 25 people have introduced themselves. So go ahead and let me know who you are, where you're from, what the weather conditions are like in your part of the country or in your part of the world today, and if it's colder than 32 degrees Fahrenheit, because that is approximately the temperature here on the National Mall right now. All right, so let's head over to the Air and Space Museum. A lot of people have been asking me about this. I've been getting messages, and one of the most important questions is it open? The answer to that is yes, with an asterisk. And the second is, if I went before, is there anything new? And the answer to that one is mostly no. So the Air and Space Museum about half reopened last year, and it is still about half reopened. In 2025, the full renovation will be complete, and I think it will be amazing. But this year, 2024, you're still going to be looking at a basically half reopened Air and Space Museum. Now, I do think this is really cool. This is new, and I've been kind of watching them slowly build this entranceway here over the last several months, and it looks super cool. So you may have to stand in line, but at least you'll be under a cool overhang there. And Eddie Saunders, good to see you, my friend. Thank you for the coffee. That's going to be a lot of coffee, a few mugs. Do appreciate that. Might be coffee and a soup at the rate we're going here. Okay, let's see. Eddie Saunders says, I liked the Lafayette, but there's also the Old Faithful Ebbett Grill, which I always visit. Yeah, Old Ebbett is the most famous restaurant in all of Washington, D.C. This guy on the scooter was playing copyrighted music, trying to steer clear of his copyrighted music. All right, so Rolls Ferrari says, surprised me that around the mall, outside of steakhouses and the food court, there weren't any dinner choices past 6-ish. It's interesting to me that people expect there to be food around here, because this is a park. This is a big park. And just kind of like, you know, when you go to Central Park, there's not like a bunch of fine dining restaurants in there. Yeah, there's hot dog stands. Yeah, there's concession stands. And yeah, you can leave the park, and nearby there's plenty of places to go. I mean, the National Mall is not that different from that. So when you come here expecting to go to the park. And so there's not really any dining options in the park itself. You will have to leave to something. And that's why when folks sign up for a tour with me, I always make sure that they know, hey, when we're done, there's not really going to be any dining options in the immediate vicinity. So either check out, you know, Old Ebbett or the Hamilton, which are the two closest nearby, or scope out a place near where you're staying that you can go to afterwards. And Sky Blue Jay thoroughly recommends the private tour. It takes about 2.5 to 3 hours, and Jay says it was well worth it. Well, I'm happy to hear such a good testimonial from you, Jay. It was great to meet your family. And remember, if you have been on tour with me before, I do have an unadvertised second timers tour. I think I've given it 3 times now, and I have a 4th signed up for this spring. So don't feel like you took the tour with me and that's it. I do have something else for you if you've been on tour with me, and at this point there have been many of you, so always happy to have folks come back. Eddie Saunders also says the tours are awesome, and Eddie says Elephant and Castle was good, casual, but when I last visited was good. Yeah, it's more of a casual place, not an upscale, not a fancy type place. Definitely more on the casual end of the spectrum. Michael Shade, good to see you here, my friend. And Michael wants to know what I think of the Capitals and Wizards teams possibly moving to Virginia. I think it stinks. I mentioned that in the most recent Trip Hacks DC podcast episode. I think it stinks. I've lost a lot of respect for the owner of the teams. The more I read about kind of the behind the scenes scheming and wheeling and dealing that he was doing with the teams, hard to have a lot of respect. So it's not a done deal. And if it does happen, the actual move won't happen until 2028. So it's going to be kind of an awkward transition there. Now, I know other teams, if you're from Oakland, perhaps you feel the pain here, having lost many teams. But no, it stinks. It stinks to have a billionaire owner saying that they want to up and move your teams. And let's see, Paul says belated Happy New Year from Liverpool, UK. Thank you, Paul and Jane. And Karen is tuned in from Glen Ridge, New Jersey. Cold here too, I imagine it is. And let's see, Juicy, did you get a new screen name there? Juicy says it's 2 degrees here in the Midwest. 2 degrees. If that's Fahrenheit, that's very cold. Like I said, the coldest tour I think I've done was last year on Christmas Eve when it was 9 degrees. And I almost never do this. You know, if you've ever taken a tour with me, you know, when you sign up, it says Trip Packs DC Tours, run, rain or shine. It's just like the post office, just like the mail person. But I did offer on that 9-degree day, I did say, look, if you don't want to do it, we can cancel. But, you know, folks are only here when they're here. And it's like, sometimes you get lucky with the weather, sometimes you don't. And if you don't, what are you going to do? Sit around in your hotel and watch movies? So I totally respect anyone who still wants to do it. I will always be willing, unless it's like a hurricane or some other dangerous situation, always be willing to come out and do the tour. And Sky Blue Jay says we enjoyed Clyde's. Yeah, so Clyde's is a solid choice. So Clyde's Restaurant Group, they also own Old Abbott Grill, they own the Hamilton, they own Clyde's, probably some others. And it's like, you're gonna get a solid meal there. But you're probably also not gonna get like a life-changing meal there. So those are the pros and cons. And, oh, the Average Joe forgot to say hello. Thank you, Joe. And the Average Joe said, I recently read that the restaurant scene is suffering in DC, but thought it is wrong. My take. The restaurant scene is really, like, you could make this case every single year because the restaurant business in general is extremely fluid. I remember I listened to an interview once with a restaurateur, and he said, you know, people judge restaurants really harshly. And he said, you know, if I open a restaurant and I have 3 profitable years and then I close it down, I'd call that a success. And that was kind of interesting to me because I thought, wow, you know, for most people, if they look at a business that closes after 3 years, they'd call that a failure. But he said he'd call that a success because things are always constantly changing and evolving, and people's tastes are changing, that you've got to kind of evolve with it. So every single year, restaurants are going to open, restaurants are going to close. And that said, January in particular is always the hardest month, I think, for restaurants because people are still kind of hungover from the holidays. They're trying to pinch their pennies a little bit more. And so that's why, for example, they do the Winter Restaurant Week in January, is to try to drum up some business. And that's upcoming. So I think there's a case to be made that the restaurant business, industry is struggling because it's always struggling. Hopefully that sufficiently answers your question, Joe. And Juicy says, I am really busy. I have multiple businesses, and so it feels like, yes, very busy. That's why it's really important, if you want to do a private tour, that you get those booked as soon as possible, because there's only one me, and so whatever's on the calendar is what there is. Gary Sorensen says, Jay and Eddie are correct. The tours are done really well. Thank you, Eddie. Eddie has been on tour with me at least 2 times. Gary has been on tour with me at least 2 times. Jay has been on tour with me once, but hopefully will again on his next trip to the U.S. And so I like to think if you're going to sign up multiple times, that kind of speaks for itself. And Sabrina, greetings from Potsdam, Germany. Please help me pronounce. I'm terrible at pronunciation. It's evening, and we have, let's see what it says. We have 2 degrees Celsius, 36 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's approximately what we have here right now, I think. My boyfriend Christopher and I will be in DC again in June. Excellent. So June, a very different weather experience, obviously. All right, Bat Dog says, having been a vendor at restaurants, that's an accurate statement. So I have interviewed Jessica Sidman, food editor for Washingtonian Magazine, twice on the Trip Hacks DC podcast, and I also recently heard her being interviewed as a guest on the CityCast DC podcast, and the interviewer asked her basically that exact same question, like, you know, are restaurants suffering? Is the industry in decline? And I kind of stole my answer from what she gave there. So I highly recommend, if you want a take from a source that's kind of more in the know than me, check that out, CityCast DC podcast. Just look for the most recent episode with Jessica from Washingtonian. And Jay says, don't forget to like the video. Yes, please like the video. I'm not going to lie and say that it helps the algorithm, because I actually don't believe that it does. But what it does do is that it shows me that people enjoy these enough for me to do more in the future. So if you have been a long time follower of Trip Hacks DC, I started doing these 3-ish years ago, these live streams. I started doing them during COVID when tour business was very slow. And so I haven't been doing them quite as frequently just because tour business is back. And so it's not as much time for these, but it is helpful for me to know that people enjoy these enough for me to continue doing them. And Luis says, greetings from Costa Rica. I think Costa Rica is a destination that on a day like today, a lot of people are dreaming of. Oh, J.A., sorry about that. I missed when you said you were from Hawaii, so it is not in the 30s. All right. I have not been to Hawaii. Would love to go, but it has not happened yet. And Eddie says, I'm thinking of trying to visit in March or April. Work has been busy. Yeah, Eddie seems to always be working. Hopefully you can find some time to sneak away from the office or home office or whatever your setup is right now. March and April, obviously, very busy. Spring break, cherry blossom season. So once you pick out your dates, let me know. Let me know when you'll be here. All right, and one more time before I wrap this thing up, I want to go ahead and put up the schedule, the grid for Trip Hacks DC tours in spring 2024. There are 3 tour offerings. All of them cover the same sites. All of them take the same amount of time. But the differences are what you see in the rows here on the grid. So private tour with me is a flat price. It's guaranteed with me, and it's for single groups, anywhere from a solo traveler up to a big family of 10 or families traveling together. And available dates are on the website. Semi-private tour with me will run on Saturdays, 4 Saturdays, the last 2 in March, the first 2 in April. Tickets are $89, and I'm calling it a semi-private tour because the group size is limited to only 10 participants. So we will not be doing any big groups on tours with me. Still going to be small, and those will go out Saturdays at 9 a.m. And finally, the Monumental Trivia at Twilight Tour on Wednesdays. The first date on the calendar is March 20th, and then it will go every Wednesday after that at 5:30 p.m. Christine is the leader. Christine is the best tour guide, and you will have a lot of fun no matter which of these that you choose. All right, Juicy says, do I think the cherry blossoms will bloom early? Oh, asking someone to predict the cherry blossoms is a fool's errand. The cherry blossom bloom is notoriously difficult to predict and depends entirely on weather in basically February and early March. So if it's a very cold February and early March, you'll get a later bloom. If it's a warm one, you'll get an earlier bloom. That said, if you're just following the data, the smarter money would be on an earlier bloom for the simple fact that it just doesn't seem like we have many cold winters anymore. Today is obviously a bit of an exception, but the trend seems to definitely be moving in the opposite direction. So an earlier bloom, the smart money I think would be on an earlier bloom, but never know for sure. And hey, Sky Blue Jay, thank you for the coffee, my friend. $4.99 pounds. How's the pound doing these days? I haven't checked in a while. Those pounds used to be really valuable to us here. All right, Luis says it is a very pleasant 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, how about that? Making everybody jealous. And yes, thank you, Eddie. Eddie has posted the historical dates. I think the average, so if you average out all those dates now, it's actually sometime during the last week in March. So if you're just following the averages, you're most likely to get a bloom like the last week in March, more so than in April. And yeah, so that table that Eddie posted is from 2010 onwards. I believe the Capital Weather Gang did an analysis going back like to the beginning of the Cherry Blossom Festival, which was 100 years ago or something like that. Don't remember when they did that though. So anyone with good Googling skills will have to try to dig that one out. All right, so we've been going for 31 minutes, which is longer than I thought I would make it. Try to make it over to the Library of Congress and then call it. So if you have any final thoughts, questions, curiosities, go ahead and put those in to the live chat now. Also, don't forget that I do plan on continuing in 2024 my Q&A series, my short video Q&A series. So if you have a question about an upcoming trip, leave it as a comment, not as a live chat, but as a comment on any video. And if I haven't answered it yet, I will add it to the queue and I will answer it. Now, please, this is very helpful. When you ask your question, just ask the question. Don't, give me a bunch of background about your trip and when you're coming and all kinds of stuff, because the way that YouTube formats it is that it only puts like the first few lines. So if you write like, a story about your trip and then ask your question at the very end, it looks all weird. So just ask your question. And then if I haven't answered it yet, I will put it into the queue. And if you haven't seen it yet, 2 weeks ago, on January 1st, I published a video with my plan for 2024. Anyone who is an avid viewer of YouTube may have seen quite a few big names have called it quits recently. They're retiring, hanging it up. Tom Scott, one of the biggest ones. And yeah, I get it, It's kind of a grind making videos week in and week out. So I definitely don't plan to stop, but changing up how it goes a little bit in 2024. Bat Dog misses DC and needs to move back. Make it happen. And let's see. Do you need to make a reservation to visit the House of Congress? Well, you do. Depends on what that question means exactly. You can visit the Capitol. The Capitol Visitor Center is open to the public. I highly, highly, highly recommend making a reservation for a Capitol tour. You can do that on the Capitol Visitor Center website. Go ahead and make a reservation and take your tour that way. You technically don't need a reservation to just go inside the visitor center, but I don't really know what value there is in just going in the visitor center other than to use the restroom potentially. And Juicy, hey, small Americano. I appreciate that. I'm going to be drinking a lot of coffee this afternoon. I am curious if anyone has been to DC and they have a favorite coffee shop, coffee establishment. What is it? I am a big fan of Zeke's. There is a Zeke's right over near the White House on 15th Street. Definitely very convenient if you're out exploring the sites over there. And I like Zeke's because they have really good beans, and so I can get beans to bring home, grind them up in my own kitchen, make them at home. And that way I don't have to spend a ton of money on coffee out all the time, but still get to enjoy excellent coffee. And let's see, Lane, is that how you pronounce it? Lane says hi from the UK. Wondered if I might cover Mount Vernon. I might. I haven't been to Mount Vernon in a while in a situation where I actually would, make a video. I've been there just kind of for fun with friends, family, etc. But the thing is, when I go someplace, I kind of have to make a decision. Like, am I going to go here for the purpose of just enjoying it, or am I going to go for the purpose of turning it into a video? And so far, Mount Vernon has not been video material. And JA says, come visit. I think that's Hawaii, right? I would love to. Would love to visit, obviously, the historical sites in Hawaii. And I'm not much of a beach guy, got to admit that. So I think I would probably steer more towards the historical sites than the beach, but definitely would love to visit Hawaii. It's just really far. It's really far from here. In some ways, it's just as easy from here on the East Coast for us to go to Europe as it is for someone on the West Coast to go to Hawaii. So just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, it is cold.
And let's see. Is it common in this time of year that there are no people around, like 2 bars showing now? I don't understand that question. Bat Dog says Zeke's is my favorite coffee also. Yeah, Zeke's is good. And Eddie says my favorite coffee in DC is the place I get to first. That's a very diplomatic answer there. Yeah, so I like Zeke's because it's excellent and it's also a local company, but there's a lot of good local companies too. So I've reached the east side of the Capitol. Gonna go ahead and wrap it up now. We've been going for 37 minutes, which is pretty good. If you're coming this spring and want to sign up for a tour, make sure that you go to the website and check those out as soon as you can, because remember, there are limited tours available. A lot of the last week of March and first week of April is already booked up, so I hate when people wait too long and then they wind up disappointed. So if you're coming in March or April, especially during those spring break weeks, get those bookings, get those reservations, don't wait too long. That's not just for TripHacks DC tours, but for all tours. Let's see. Michael Shade says $2 large coffees at Wawa. I won't comment on that because it's not a local brand, but it's not a place where I go for coffee. And Sky Blue Jay only tried Starbucks. Well, looks like you've got a lot of places to try the next time you come. So thanks for all the tips on the coffee, and my fingers are now too cold to continue, so I will go ahead and say goodbye. But thanks for tuning in. As I say at the end of all of these, enjoy your trip.